Ice Cube said. What's up, everybody? Welcome into First Take. Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman, I'm Molly Karam. Fellas, how we feeling?
What's going on? How y'all doing? Good morning.
I'm feeling good. I might be feeling even better if there's even better Giants news down the road, but I'm feeling pretty good right now as a Giants fan.
All right, let's get into it. Brandon Marshall and the New York Giants have reached an agreement on a 2-year deal, a source told ESPN's Adam Schefter. The source says the deal is worth $12 million. Max Kellerman. How do you feel about it? Your reaction to this move?
Look, I feel good because my first reaction is it feels like Brandon Marshall wasn't trying to leave New York, the area, and was willing to take less money. That's what it sounds like. 12 over 2 years for him, and I know he's coming off the worst season of his career. Stephen A., it just sounds like a discount. Brandon Marshall, I'd be very surprised if he had another year like last year, particularly, opposite Odell Beckham Jr., not to mention Sterling Shepard. But it seems to me the Giants are pretty set at receiver. I mean, they have 2 really good receivers, one great one and one really good one. And Brandon Marshall helps there, sure, but their real issue, the Giants' real issue, is and has since their last Super Bowl team been a terrible offensive line. And an offensive line Jerry Reese keeps missing in the draft, at left tackle in particular. They got to get moved over to the right side or to guard. And that's where the need still is. And there are free agents that you're going to have to spend money on. You'd think if you're serious about winning next year, on the O-line, why is that money being spent on a receiver? Well, it seems because you could get him undervalued. That's what it seems like to me. So happy as a Giants fan to have an excellent player for less money than he seems to be worth, but still wondering what the Giants are going to do on the offensive line.
Well, you sound like it's July. Last time I checked, it's the month of March. It's plenty of time. The draft hasn't even taken place yet. I mean, calm the hell down, Max Kellerman. Chill with pump the brakes just a touch. And you also got to take into account the fact, the reason why I love this for the New York Giants so much is that it reminds me of the New England Patriots. Because I remember a few years back when their offensive when their offensive line coach was gone, New England had some issues with their offensive line as well. But what they did was they had a bevy of weapons for Tom Brady to throw the football to get rid of the ball quickly and make things happen in that regard. And because of it, they still ended up being effective. They didn't win the Super Bowl title, but they certainly went to the AFC Championship game when they lost to the Denver Broncos. What I'm saying to you with the New York Giants, you have an Odell Beckham Jr., you have a Sterling Shepard, and now what you have is a guy like Brandon Marshall who can really be a slot receiver if you need him to. He can play on the outside if you need him to. He can be a big-time bona fide number 2 option if you want him to as well. He's an interchangeable part. You can do a lot of different things with him. So again, I don't disagree with you when we're talking about Reese and needing to buffer that offensive line, especially when they played Eric Flowers out of position and we saw what happened with the kind of year that he had. But I do think that you have to consider the fact that with adding another weapon for Eli Manning, that's another roundabout way to go about protecting him, because you have an additional weapon which will assist in helping him get rid of the ball quicker, adding an additional target, etc., etc. And the fact that you're able to do all of those things, I think elevates the New York Giants. Now we get to the big question, Max, and I'm surprised you left it up to me to bring this up instead of yourself. When you consider how effective the New York Giants defense was last year and how they had upgraded, the fact that you now have Brandon Marshall, again, I'm not poo-pooing your notion that they've got to buffer the offensive line. Boo-Boo the Fool can see that. We all know they got to buffer that offensive line. But the acquisition of Brandon Marshall with Shepard and Odell Beckham Jr., I think you look at the Giants collaborating with that defense with the addition of Brandon Marshall, they're a legitimate Super Bowl contender with this move.
Listen, he's a tremendous upgrade, over Victor Cruz last year. Essentially, that's who he's replacing. Victor Cruz couldn't get separation, is not a big target like Brandon Marshall, and at his best was excellent, but really best suited as a number 2 receiver. Brandon Marshall, until last year, was one of the best half-dozen receivers in the NFL, was a great receiver, just about on that level with Odell Beckham and obviously Antonio Brown and Julio Jones and all those guys, A.J. Green, Des Bryant. Like, Brandon Marshall was giving you that kind of production, and you'd expect his production next year to split the difference maybe between last year, which wasn't really him, and the year before. I get that, but what's the Giants' issue? The passing game? No,
Excuse me,
it's blocking in the running game.
But how about that Packers game? Why did the Giants lose? It was all the drops. I get that they have Odell Beckham Jr., and I get that they have Sterling Shepard and how talented they are, but they could have used Brandon Marshall then when they couldn't hold on to the ball after that whole South Beach debacle.
A big, short-handed veteran target.
Well, here's the deal. Brandon Marshall has dropped a few passes, which is something that Teddy Bruschi pointed out. But, Max, you keep talking about last year was his worst year. I actually consider his last year in Chicago, where he had less receiving yards, his last year in Chicago with Jay Cutler, his worst year. Yeah. Me personally, I thought that was worse than last season. And then when we look at last year with the New York Jets, well, let's consider the fact that the Jets haven't had any productivity from the tight end spot in the last 2 years. We look at an Eric Decker, he went down. Matt Forte wasn't what he was supposed to be. Ryan Fitzpatrick comes into camp late because he's looking to get his money, and there was a contract dispute. Geno Smith gets his jaw cracked, by somebody. So all of these things get taken into consideration. I don't believe we can hold the production from Brandon Marshall accountable to Brandon Marshall from last year. The New York Jets were an absolute collective mess.
It hurt him, but he also didn't look as good as he did the year before, independent of that.
Well, I'm just saying, if somebody's not throwing a football to you and you don't have additional weapons to take the pressure off of you, then I'm not going to go for, he didn't look the same, because I don't know how he looked.
At $6 million a year, 2 years, $12 million, you can't pass up on Brandon Marshall at those numbers. But the NFL, a hard cap league, you must rob Peter to pay Paul. There is no way around that. And in terms of, the draft hasn't even happened yet. Let's see how that Giants draft goes. Jerry Reese has not really inspired confidence in his recent drafts in terms of addressing the Giants' offensive lines. Used some first round and mostly second round picks to try to do it, and has not been that successful. So there's some interesting guards and even a left tackle in free agency that may not be so expensive, but maybe a little harder to get now that you've spent this money. Look, we agree that's a signing you can't pass up. I'm just saying that's not the Giants' real area of need. It's the running game.
But once again, you're regurgitating your points with a whole bunch of numbers I don't give a damn about instead of answering my question.
No, they're not.
Are the New York Giants elevated as a Super Bowl contender? Yes or no?
They are better than they were after this signing. They're not yet a Super Bowl contender. They have to address the running game and the line.
Wait a minute.
Pieces away, though.
Hold it. Who just played in the NFC Championship game?
Not the
Was
Giants.
that not the Green Bay Packers?
Yep.
Where was their running game?
Yeah, with Aaron Rodgers, anything is possible, just about. Even they got slaughtered in that game, incidentally. Against a team without a defense.
Aaron Rodgers with subpar targets. Eli Manning with 3 big-time targets.
Yep.
That don't measure up?
Well, that's still not a Super Bowl contender. The Green Bay Packers
How's that not a Super Bowl contender?
They got beaten up in that game, in the NFC Championship game.
They were still a contender. You lost to the
champion.
Excuse me, you get to the conference championship game. That makes you a contender. You went in the Final Four teams.
If you're asking, can the Giants get to the playoffs and maybe win a playoff game with Brandon Marshall, the answer is yes. If you're asking me, are they one of my top half dozen teams, let's say, or something like that to win the Super Bowl based on this move? The answer is no. They are a little better than they were before the move. Brandon Marshall's an excellent player. I'm psyched as a Giants fan, but this is not the area of need for this team.
It's not the area of need for several teams, but the bottom line is when you have a multitude of passing attacks, you can get away with the absence of a running game.
They're better with Brandon Marshall. What team wouldn't be better with Brandon Marshall?
But now the focus needs to be the offensive line, clearly.